Richard, let's go ahead and jump into that first call with Cows Our Friend. Howdy, good morning.
Hello there. Hi, Christy. Hi, Richard. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, absolutely. What's on your mind today?
I called in last week to talk about faith and Buddhism. And during that call, the host drew a line between aspects of Buddhism, like meditation, that are empirically verified to work in certain settings, and therefore
Sure.
can be seen as beneficial aspects of Buddhism. And kind of delineating that from aspects that are rooted more in belief, that are not empirically verified, and which therefore are not beneficial or even harmful. And today I would like to kind of challenge that framing. I believe that establishing views is also very much a part of Buddhist practice, and not so much as dogmas, not as epistemic grounds for truth, but as skillful means to bring about beneficial psychological change. And
No, I think that you're in a really good space. I work in a lot of Buddhist psychology, and Richard has a very strong background in the history of Buddhism and other aspects of it. So what is it that you are, what is your kind of ultimate question here?
So my ultimate question is is there ever a situation in which you would say that holding a view, even if that view is not empirically verified, could still be okay to hold for the benefit of that view, for the sort of psychological changes that holding that view?
I would definitely say that it is, depending on maybe how we define the idea of holding a belief. Do we hold it lightly? Do we hold it with an attachment, with an unwillingness to let it go in the face of new information? If I operate under the assumption that every stranger I meet will probably be a kind and decent person and worthy of my kindness, I think that is a unverified belief that is a good one to hold on to. And if that stranger comes up and punches me in the face, I think it's probably a good idea for me to keep my distance.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is also how I see it. Views are beneficial or can be seen as beneficial in general. And then in very specific cases, they can clearly become harmful, or they can just be shown as harmful in general. Like it could be that you hold a view, and it just turns out that that view is not helping you at all. And I think in that case, it is good to drop a view, including, I guess, the sort of religious views that I'm holding.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that a little bit. When we start talking about unverified religious views, what is it that you're maybe concerned about or are kind of curious about whether or not some extra skepticism might be appropriate?
So the kind of views I hold, I think the one that is most on my mind is the view of karma and rebirth, which I hold as very central to my Buddhist faith, and which I obviously cannot demonstrate to be true.
Yeah, so how does it offer you benefit?
I think the way it provides me benefit is that by really putting my actions and the consequence of my actions so central, it really puts agency first. It really puts me in a position where I feel like the best way to build on my own happiness is to act today. That I shouldn't wait for others to do it, or that I should just sort of take my lot in life and accept that for what it is. But really that my actions is what shapes my future.
Yeah, no, I can definitely appreciate that viewpoint. And I think that you are headed in the right direction, but maybe adding some unnecessary steps when we throw in this sort of magical belief in reincarnation. Because there's plenty of evidence, or at least some pretty logical arguments, to dispute the notion of reincarnation. We don't need to necessarily get into all of that or debate whether or not it can be conclusively disproved. Really depends on some of our terms and how we're imagining reincarnation to exist and all of these kinds of things. But what I'm hearing you say is that by being mindful and intentional about your actions, you are working to the betterment of yourself and the people around you. I think that you can just do that without having to imagine any sort of like cosmic scorekeeping. And I wonder if it wouldn't benefit you to let go of that more magical component to it. How does that framework strike you?
I mean, possibly, I guess. I think there could be several possible bases for holding a particular outlook on life. That said, this is the one I have. And like, if you're saying like I should reject this, then I feel like there should also be a reason for that. Like this should be shown like that it is more harmful than some other way in which I could maybe reach the same conclusions.
Sure. And I can definitely walk down that path with you. I don't mean to feel like I can convince you or force you to reject some belief that you hold dear. But I do think that there is a lot to be said about what happens when we bring magical thinking into our framework, and how by simplifying things, by maintaining what we know to be true, we can get at the heart of our goals rather than wrapping it up in some of this mysticism that can potentially lead us down the wrong path. But before I really dive into all of that, Richard, I want to kind of get you in here to see how this framework even lines up with, I don't know, maybe common thoughts on Buddhism, or how reincarnation is a necessary or integral belief or not in this space.
Yeah, I've been quiet on purpose because I've had plenty of conversations with Cal's friends, and I know you would have somewhere to go with it. So I kind of wanted to let you kind of take the lead on this one a little bit, and I talk a lot on the Buddhist calls as well. So,
Sure.
But yeah, I think, look, there's the first part of your question, Christy. What is the kind of Buddhist consideration of reincarnation? And that depends, because in religious studies there is not a thing as in on the whole with any religion, and this applies to Buddhism as well. There is not a Buddhism. There are Buddhisms, because we have to take into context its movement through time and place as well. We don't kind of look at religions on the basis of this is the religion. That's what gatekeepers do. That's what people who commit the not a true Scotsman fallacy do.
Sure.
And there are lots of different ideas, and a good example of this is in Tibet. Tibetan Buddhism is a really, really famous form of Buddhism. It's one of the more famous schools of Buddhism. But Tibetan Buddhism is very much conjoined with the native Bon tradition from Tibet. So a lot of aspects of Tibetan Buddhism are actually aspects of the Bon tradition that predated Buddhism in Tibet. And we see this as Buddhism moves. We've seen it as it's moved into the West and taken on more secular aspects, where in a lot of cases, people who call themselves Buddhists, who identify as Buddhists, don't even accept any of those supernatural elements of it. For me, it's quite clear scripturally from the kind of early Buddhist texts, which is the ones that I kind of look at most. It's quite clearly scripturally that the Buddha believed that reincarnation was a thing. He taught it as a true thing, and he taught it as integral to the Buddhist path to enlightenment. it is a supernatural element. It's quite clearly stated on a couple of different occasions where the Buddhist tells the people around him, you should, and this is what gives me the kind of confidence to say that it is an integral part of what he believed Buddhism to be, because there's a couple of occasions where he says, you should abandon the religions of your ancestors. You should abandon the religions of your family and your attachment to them. And when you come into this path, this practice, which Cal's our friend correctly identified as a kind of the Buddhist moral system is what is beneficial to you, accept what is beneficial and reject what is not, as opposed to the kind of hard good and evil of a lot of kind of Western religions. And that is, it quite clearly stated that, this accepting this is accepting the wisdom of the Buddha. It's not, throw your family stuff aside and accept the wisdom of the Buddha and practice this. And by practice, you will see that what I am teaching you is true. And certainly reincarnation and other supernatural aspects, including supernormal powers and things like that, were clearly stated by him as being true. Does that mean that you have to hold to those things as true to gain benefit from Buddhist practice? That is a very, very difficult and nuanced question, because it depends entirely what you think Buddhist practice is and will give you. If you are of the kind of, let's say, traditional mindset where you think that you are on this path, you will be reincarnated, you will become enlightened, but it could take eons to happen, then yes, you can say it's an integral aspect. If you look at meditation practice as a utility to gain good things from, then no, it's not necessarily necessary to hold on to that, because we can see the utility of meditation practice. It's, the utility of meditation practice is well known. It really, really is well known. There's been plenty of scientific studies done on this thing. It's vastly used, as you know yourself, in kind of emotional health support and things like that. And it's used in neurological. So a lot of people.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you there for a moment, Richard. Cows are friends. How did you? What did you get out of all of that? Where are you at with this conversation now?
Well, I mean, I would agree that there's a lot you can get out of Buddhism without the supernatural views. Like, yes, meditation, very beneficial in other contexts than the one of a religious Buddhism. I guess my intent for this call was to also point out that building up certain views is also a part of that practice, and that it is also sort of within this framework of, like, it could be beneficial or harmful to hold this or that view. Therefore, it can be good or bad to cultivate that sort of view up to a point, like not as like this is the absolute truth, not this is a dogma, but as like holding this view is psychologically beneficial. So that's really where I want to get to, and then maybe we can go into specific views like karma.
Yeah. No, and I feel like I'm very much on board with what you're saying, but I would also suggest that one of the criteria for whether or not a view is beneficial ought to be your willingness to reconsider it in the face of evidence. And to that end, I would express that holding on to a view in reincarnation when there is not any meaningful evidence to suggest it, and there is evidence to suggest against it, would mean that it would be in your best interest to let go of that view and to embrace a worldview that is willing to adapt to the evidence on hand. How do you respond to that?
So I would agree that if there was clear evidence against reincarnation, I would have to dropped a few. I haven't seen it. So, I mean, I've seen evidence against very crude forms of conceptualizing reincarnation for sure, but not necessarily in the full like doctrinal breadth of Buddhism.
May I ask,
Like,
Kausa friend,
there
if
is
you've
a
seen
lot-
evidence for reincarnation? And I'm going to go down a path with this. So just kind of give me a quick yes or no response.
No, I've not.
Right. So you've just kind of stated, and please correct me if I'm wrong, why should you reject it if you've not seen evidence against it, is the general gist I got from you. But why don't you do that with things like Christianity or Islam or any other religion? The belief in Thor. You've not seen evidence for them, but you've not seen evidence against them. So why not just accept those as well? What's so special about reincarnation that it leads you to think, this I must set aside in this special place where, using the same criteria, I will throw other beliefs away?
Because I'm not just picking up views because they have not shown to be false yet. I'm specifically following a Buddhist path where I have confidence that the things the Buddha taught are beneficial to me. And so I am more willing to adapt those than a belief in Torah or a belief in Jesus.
So let's have a look at Jesus as one example. What about Jesus' teachings do you not think are beneficial as a means of practice? Because bear in mind, we're putting the supernatural elements aside here. So regarding the actual practical utilitarian ideas that Jesus taught, love your neighbor and this kind of thing, what is it that you don't agree with those that you do agree with in Buddha's teachings?
I think putting your faith in salvation through the power of someone else is putting yourself in a position of helplessness. And I think...
Is that what you're doing in Christianity, though? Because surely you're doing the work yourself. If there are many Jesus, and this is a thing in Christianity. This is an actual thing where there's this argument against salvation by works and by faith. There are a great many Christians who think you do need to do the work yourself to earn what that gift, if you like, that Jesus was offering. Is that any different to doing the work that the Buddha taught you to attain enlightenment?
I mean, it's different work, but I would concede your point that this faith is something that could motivate someone to doing good things and bettering themselves. Yes.
Okay, I have no further questions, Your Honor. Christy?
Yeah, I mean, I was curious where you were looking to go with all of that, Richard. And I guess I would just kind of go back to my refrain around how there is a lot of danger in holding on to beliefs that don't have good evidence, good epistemology behind them. I can appreciate you isolating some of these beliefs and saying, well, I believe that following the teachings of Buddha make me a better person or help me to contribute to making a better world. And I can absolutely appreciate that. I also want to stress that when you accept any belief system whole cloth and without a willingness to pick and choose or to recognize or accept the pieces that don't make sense, that you are putting yourself in a position to believe things that can be incredibly harmful. So even if you can make the claim that by continuing to believe in reincarnation, that you are becoming a better person, that you are helping to make for a better world, one that I'm not really convinced of, but even if you were to hold on to that claim, if you are willing to accept all things Buddhism, TM, because they're Buddhism, then you can find yourself in some really dark pathways where you're unwilling to accept knowledge, where you're unwilling to let go of things that are being proven to cause a lot of harm. And so I guess I'm just not on board with this idea that we can say, well, I think it's good for me, and I can't prove that it's definitely not real, so I'll just hold on to it anyway. It just feels like a very dangerous ideology.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the danger, or I understand your point regarding the danger. That's like following a particular view could come with other views that are harmful, but that you take in anyway because it's sort of part of the same, the same kind of cluster of views. But I also think you can be critical here. Like, I hope, I can't be sure, I'm not perfect, certainly not, but I hope that if that were to happen to me, if there was some view that tried to sneak in along with this whole karma rebirth stuff that is actually harmful, that I would be able to see that it is harmful.
Yeah. And that might be where I would continue to leverage this just a little bit. I want to acknowledge that there are many formulations of reincarnation, as you've already pointed out, and we haven't spent a lot of time unpacking yours. But I want to put forward that if we are operating under these belief systems that certain actions have a moral valence to them, or that there's some sort of point system keeping track of things, we get into a real dangerous position of trying to evaluate these actions based on some rubric that is totally arbitrary. And that causes us to divorce ourselves from seeing the action themselves, from seeing the motivation behind them and the consequences behind them. Whereas if we choose to be present in, hey, I want to make the world a better place, so therefore I'm going to do things that work towards that end, and not worry about what category I'm operating within, without worrying about what some rubric says, we're going to be much more attuned to the needs of the situation. And just adding in that mystical element of this is going to have an impact on my eternal soul can really get us into a place where we're missing the point of what we're doing, and we're like looking for the score rather than playing the game.
So first off, eternal soul, not really a thing in Buddhism. But also, I think it's exactly...
I'm sorry, what is not really a thing in Buddhism? I didn't follow the term you used.
And the consequence of those actions.
The eternal soul, I think Carl's friend was saying.
Sure, yes, I very much appreciate that. It's a little bit of a shorthand, but please help walk us through that.
I mean, I wanted to make the point that, like what you were saying about like seeing the intent behind actions and the consequence of actions, like I would say that is the core. That is actually what you should be doing when you consider karma and the way it should guide your life. So I do not really see the problem you're setting up here, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So if I may jump in here a little bit, because I think I might have a resource which is might be useful for you, and it's not necessarily like anti-Buddhist or anything. It's a useful website for kind of thinking about the harms where we employ a lack of critical thinking, which is essentially, and I don't mean to be aggressive when I say that, but it's essentially what we're engaging in when we're saying we're going to accept this belief because it's not been disproven. That is technically a lack of critical thinking. So there's a guy called Tim Farley who set up a website called What's the Harm? It's whatstheharm.net. It's really, really useful because it actually goes into a lot of stories, and because we hear this all the time as educators in this area, we hear people saying, well, what's the harm of believing in Christianity if I'm only, donating to my church and I'm not the one going out and blowing buildings up. So what's the harm? And you hear it over and over again. In your case, what's the harm of believing in reincarnation, in this thing that there's no evidence for, if it's not being disproven and if I'm not engaging any negative effects from it? So, this website goes into a lot of stories surrounding why harm is caused from having these beliefs in having these beliefs and engaging in non-critical thinking surrounding things and giving the excuse, well, what's the harm in it? So it might be a decent resource for you to look at. But I've got to say, Calzafriend, I'm entirely with Christy with this one. I think especially when you're aware, as you seem to be, and you seem to fully digest this idea that there is no evidence for it, and you kind of seem to me to be present, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to presenting it as this kind of utility position and kind of brushing aside this idea that, well, we've absolutely nothing to substantiate that this is actually true. But that doesn't really matter because I don't see bad things coming from it. So therefore the utility of it is by default beneficial. I think that's dangerous thinking. And I think even if we don't see active bad things coming from it in your particular case, we might look at a larger picture of kind of beliefs in rebirth and reincarnation, and we might actually find that there can be negative effects from it. If not, and I'll give you just one quick example, it doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to Buddhist belief. There's a people who are based in the Middle East. I forgot the name. They believe in reincarnation, but in their version of reincarnation, there is no one allowed to kind of come into the religion from outside. And when you are reborn, a lot of them take on this utility position that if I say that I am from a higher class family in my past life, then a higher class family, if they accept that claim, then they will benefit my family by taking me, giving me financial incentives because they feel I am part of their direct family. That is one aspect of a negative attitude like this. I'm not sure, and I'll state this because I don't want to misrepresent anyone, I'm not sure that occurs in Buddhist reincarnation. I suspect if I dig hard enough, I will find cases where that does happen. Certainly in Tibetan Buddhism, we've got cases where, rural people have been confirmed to be, the reincarnation of certain high-class lamas, and they have been taken out of their poor setting and put into, a family or in a position where they are well looked after, and subsequently their family is well looked after. Is that negative? That's a further conversation, I think. But I think this goes beyond just simply saying, well, there is no harm in it. I think if we dig a little deeper under the surface, we can find harm in it. We can certainly find harm in Buddhism as a whole when we just lightly scrape the surface. But, specific beliefs like this, I think we might actually find that stuff. Please respond to that.
No, I mean, there's a sense of like spiritual classism or hierarchy that's kind of inherent to a lot of these philosophies. So I didn't mean to jump in there, Calzafriend. Please respond.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of views that are bad and wrong, and some of them are about reincarnation and rebirth. I think it's a bit much, though, to sort of say, like, therefore, hold none of those views. like I'm sure we could look at lots of scientific things, like just look at like various racist theories that try to base themselves in forms of evolution, where I mean any well-thinking scientist dealing with evolution would be able to completely disprove that, but you would not tell them like stop believing in evolution because those crazy guys over there are making it into this big racist thing. So I don't think I can really follow in this line of thought.
That seems really kind of curious. That are you saying, and I'm going to ask you a direct question now, are you saying you're not willing to follow up on this line of thought? You're not willing to kind of engage with it and think about it and actually seek out to see if this is the case?
I'm willing to look in all sorts of things, but I am not going to take responsibility in my views because there's other people who hold other views. I think that is a way too big an ask. Yes.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate that. And yes, there are perhaps good versions and bad versions of every philosophy if we want to oversimplify it or be reductive in that way. Again, I don't necessarily know all of the particulars of your perspective on reincarnation. And maybe if we were to suss some of that out and get a better sense of what your philosophies are, we could be a little bit more direct. But I think what Richard and I are trying to do is just highlight some of the common concerns that exist in this space and recognize the fact that anytime we accept a belief without good supporting evidence and we don't grapple with the epistemology of a particular philosophy, we open ourselves up to vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities of your belief system are something that we are not able to extricate because we don't know all of the ins and outs of it. So if it is benefiting your life, bully for you. You know, I really do mean that and maintain that. There are people in the chat saying things along the lines of like, hey, it's always better to live in reality than to live in a delusion, even if it's a healthful delusion. And I would push back against that because I think that it's sort of a fallacy to have any of us believe that we are living in, quote, reality. We are all experiencing a delusion, and finding reality requires us to recognize that we are all having a veil between us and, quote, objective truth. I don't think that means that we should give up on the search, though, that we should be willing to accept things for bad reasons, that we shouldn't be interested in what we can find empirical evidence to support. I hope that kind of sums it all up here. Is there anything more that needs to be added?
I think just to tag on the end of that, and you know, this is based on what Cowser Friend themselves said a little while ago about other people doing bad things who have these beliefs. Doesn't necessarily mean that you know, having those beliefs are bad if you're not employing that yourself. If I'm representing what you said correctly there, do you not think that if that's the case, if you are completely convinced that karma, reincarnation is true, rebirth is true, and you see all around you other people who engage with this belief and they're doing it wrong in your view, do you not think there is some responsibility to perhaps correct them and kind of say to them, look, I don't believe you're living this out correctly. You're interpreting this correctly. I think you're wrong. And I think we need to reassess the way or the way you're evaluating this. And before you answer yes or no to that, I kind of also want to present the case of, in certain religions, there are people who are really, really anti-gay based on that revision, and people who are pro-gay and in fact gay and practice in those religions. And I see in a lot of those cases, those gay people or those pro-gay people fighting against those kind of, or are doing the wrong thing in their view. They are actively vocal about it and want to correct them, and correctly so as well, regardless of any other beliefs that they hold. Do you, and there's not a right or wrong answer to this, by the way, I'm not trying to set a trap for you. Do you think that there is a moral responsibility to call other people out who you see and think are misinterpreting this belief?
Yes, I do think there's that moral responsibility.
Yeah. Like I say, it wasn't a trap or anything. I was just curious about your answer to that, and I'd be interested in perhaps a future call on kind of how you might approach that. I've certainly known, Buddhist monks, indeed abbots of monasteries, who've seen things they disagree with, and that they've seen other Buddhist people doing, and they have made a phone call and said, I do not appreciate you doing that. I think you're doing it wrong. Can we not engage in that behavior? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict thing, but certainly if you hold that there is a right way to behave or a right way to act when these things are mentioned, I wonder how you'd challenge that in your own community, and hold that thought, because I think we're going to get onto another call in a minute. I do appreciate your calling, Cal's a friend, always. We always have really, really great conversations. I'm going to let kind of Christy have the last word, because I think this is the first time he's possibly spoken to you, and I've certainly enjoyed listening to you two dialogue. So, Christy?
Yeah, no, just I do appreciate the conversation, and you're striking on issues that are very near to my heart, because it is important to me that we all recognize that our quote worldview is somewhat arbitrary and inevitably imperfect. And so sort of maximizing that, bringing some intentionality to that, is a very important thing to me. I do think that we have to not only accept with humility the fact that our worldview is not always, quote, rational or accurate, but that we can maximize that by making certain choices about what we believe, even in the absence of like all of the data that we would need in order to truly know something. That being said, it's a dangerous world when you start to accept things because they have a certain label attached to them, if you don't have any good evidence to support that belief system. And while I very much appreciate that you are very thoughtful and seemingly very introspective about your experiences of reincarnation, I can't help but feel a little bit squeamish about it. I would love to talk further in the future about some of your specific philosophies or understandings of that concept, because I would love to just understand better how you protect against some of the dangers that we've highlighted. But for now, I'm just really grateful to you for calling.
Thank you for having my call, and have a good rest of your show.
Thank you so much. You as well.